Huntsville's women's prison smelled of cheap detergent and desperation. Megan Riley knew that better than anyone. The 32-year-old woman sat on her narrow bunk, her long legs tucked under her, staring at the cracks in the ceiling. Each one had become as familiar to her over the past 2 years as the lines on her own palm. Megan ran her hand through the light blonde hair that had once been her pride, well-groomed, with expensive coloring at a salon on Austin's 6th Street. Now they were dull, carelessly gathered into a ponytail. 6 years for fraud 2 behind, 4 ahead. Sometimes she thought she'd grow old within these walls. Before prison, Megan's life had been a glossy magazine picture, a job at a real estate firm, an apartment overlooking the river, dating wealthy men. No one knew that the real estate documents that passed through her hands sometimes contained forged signatures and inflated amounts. She'd been ratted out by a former lover after she'd broken up with him. "Riley, check," the warden said indifferently as she stood in the cell doorway. Megan rose from her bunk, straightened her back, and straightened the creases in her prison robe. She had long ago noticed that even here, the way you look and hold yourself determines the attitude of those around you. Her cellmate, Lisa Taylor, a 29-year-old red-haired woman in jail for grand larceny, had nicknamed her Miss Perfect, not without sarcasm, but with a measure of respect. "As flawless as ever," Lisa said, watching Megan brush a loose strand of hair out of her face. "Who are you trying for? For the rats in the cafeteria?" Megan smiled with the corner of her lips, but didn't answer. Lisa didn't need to know that in the last 3 months, she'd had a reason to look better than the prison routine demanded. James Foster, 38-year-old guard, average height, short haircut, and small wrinkles around his eyes from frequent smiling, unhappily married. Megan always sensed that unmistakably. 2 children he spoke warmly of, a job he didn't like, and a home loan. A typical American story. Their gazes first met in the library, where Megan went more often than any other inmate. She'd always been drawn to smart men, and James was well-read, a rarity among the local guards. At first it had been just talking about books, then the occasional touching while handing over forms, and then Megan knew the prison nooks and crannies where the cells didn't work. James knew the duty roster she wasn't planning on falling in love. It was just supposed to be fun, a way to brighten the endless gray days. But something in his tentative smile, in the way he listened to her, really listened, had touched long-forgotten strings in her soul. "You've changed," Lisa said one day, looking closely at Megan. "You smile in your sleep." Megan brushed it off, but was inwardly wary Lisa was observant, which was why she had been valued on the thieves' crew before her arrest. She could be silent all day long, but she noticed every little thing. That night, Megan felt nauseous for the first time. At first, she wrote it off as prison food, but her intuition immediately told her the truth. A week later, after bribing a nurse with 2 packs of cigarettes, she got a pregnancy test, 2 stripes. There was no point in denying the obvious. James reacted just as she'd anticipated. With horror, they met in the back of the laundry room. Are you sure?" His normally calm face contorted with fear. Megan nodded, pressing her hand to her still flat stomach. 1,000 thoughts raced through her head. A baby in prison was a disaster, but at the same time, it was a chance for early release on humanitarian grounds, or at least a transfer to a better facility. "I'm going to lose everything," James whispered, sliding down the wall. "My job, my family. I'm going to go to jail myself." Megan hugged him, inhaling the scent of male deodorant that had become so familiar. She didn't want to admit to herself that she'd already calculated how to exploit the situation. "We'll figure something out," she whispered, stroking his tense shoulders. Over the next few days, Megan noticed James avoiding her gaze while on duty. She understood his fear, but she couldn't suppress the irritation. A relationship in prison between a guard and an inmate wasn't just a violation of the rules. It was a crime. James could get real jail time. Lisa caught her one morning when Megan returned from the restroom, where she'd been throwing up again. "You're in trouble," she said simply, not asking, but affirming. "And I can guess what they are." Megan wanted to lie, but suddenly felt tired of the constant pretense. "I'm pregnant." Lisa stared at her silently for a few seconds, then sat down next to her on the bunk. "Foster?" Megan nodded, surprised at her roommate's insight. "You're not the first, and you won't be the last," Lisa shrugged. "Only usually these stories don't end well." Megan sensed the warning in her words, but dismissed the uneasy feeling she had always been able to get out of difficult situations. After all, it wasn't without reason that the teachers at school had predicted a great future for her before she'd been expelled for faking grades. Rumors spread faster in prison than anywhere else. By the end of the week, slanted glances and whispers behind her back were commonplace. Megan noticed the other guards starting to look at her and James, searching for confirmation of the gossip. In the mess hall, one of the inmates, Donna Mitchell, a woman with hard features and a reputation for prison gossip, stopped by her table. "They say you found a way to brighten up your incarceration." She grinned loud enough to be heard at neighboring tables. "I wonder what Foster's wife would say." Megan felt a chill run down her spine. The threat was clear. Donna had connections on the outside, and through them the information could reach James's family. 2 days later, Principal Robert Harris summoned James to his office. Megan had heard about it from another inmate who worked in the administrative block. 55-year-old Harris had been in charge of the prison for over a decade and had a reputation for being tough but fair. He hated scandals and did everything he could to keep information about problems in his institution from leaking out. When James returned to duty that evening, his face was pale and his hands were trembling slightly. As he passed Megan in the hallway, he whispered only one word: dangerous. Megan spent a sleepless night contemplating her situation. Her hand went to her belly, where a new life was being born. Unwanted, untimely, but already changing everything. She thought about James, about their relationship that had begun out of boredom and grown into something more, about what she really needed from him. Protection? Money? Freedom? The dim light was seeping through the barred window when Megan finally made her decision. She'll use this pregnancy as a bargaining chip. After all, it's the only advantage she has. The prison library was the only place Megan could feel any sense of freedom. Tall shelves of battered books gave the illusion of privacy. Megan sat in the far corner, pretending to read a Steinbeck novel but actually waiting for James. Her hands trembled slightly as she turned the pages without taking in the text. It had been 3 weeks since she had informed him of the pregnancy. 3 weeks of his avoiding glances and nervous whispers. He wouldn't be able to sneak out today. At 22 o'clock, he'd go on night duty on this block, and Megan had been given special permission to study late in the library. Because of her impeccable behavior over the past few months, she heard his footsteps before she saw him. James walked with a peculiar gait, quiet but confident. A former military man, he'd never gotten out of the habit of keeping his back straight and his chin slightly raised. It was one of the qualities that had initially attracted Megan. "We need to talk," she said quietly, as he approached her desk for a standard check. James looked around. The library was empty, the other inmate librarian dozing behind the counter at the entrance. "It's not safe," he whispered, tapping his fingers nervously on the bookshelf. "Your safety is the least of my concerns right now." Megan gave him a cold stare, the same one she used to force her clients to sign unfavorable contracts. "I need the money." James's eyes widened in shock. "You don't understand, Harris has been paging me again." He didn't say anything directly, but he made it clear that he knew if it's confirmed. 20,000, Megan interrupted him, keeping her voice calm and controlled. "I need $20,000 for a lawyer in preparation for release." "Are you crazy? Where am I going to get that kind of money?" James hissed, looking back at the sleeping librarian. Megan slammed the book shut with an unexpectedly loud sound. "Sell the car. Take out a loan mortgage, the house. I'm not interested in the details." Her voice remained quiet, but each word was as distinct as a whiplash. "You have a wife and 2 kids, a career. What happens if they find out you slept with a prisoner? That you got a prisoner pregnant?" James's face reflected a whole gamut of emotions, from disbelief to anger, and finally fear. Megan saw that fear reveled in it. Power had always been her weakness ever since college, when she'd manipulated her friends, making and breaking reputations with a single word. "I knew I shouldn't have trusted you," James muttered, and something new flickered in his gaze. Disgust. You used me from the beginning." It wasn't true, and somewhere deep inside, Megan knew it. Their relationship had started spontaneously. There had been something real about it before. But right now, survival outweighed sentimentality. She had no room for regrets. "You have 2 weeks," she said, opening the book again, showing that the conversation was over. "And yes, I expect you to help me with my parole. My lawyer has already been contacted by the parole board. Pregnancy might be a good reason. Especially if I say I was abused." James's face turned white as chalk. "You wouldn't go for that." Megan only smiled, not taking her eyes off the page. When James's footsteps fell silent at the far end of the library, she finally exhaled. Unwanted tears pricked at her eyes. Some part of her wanted to believe that there could have been something real between them, that in another life, under different circumstances. But life had taught Megan one simple truth. You can only rely on yourself. Returning to her cell, Megan felt the unkind glances of the other inmates. Rumors of her pregnancy had become a certainty. The prison was like a beehive, buzzing with gossip and theories. Especially unpleasant were the whispers of a group of women loyal to the prison chaplain. They looked upon Megan as the spawn of hell, come to tempt righteous men. Thursday morning began unusually. While eating breakfast, Megan discovered a folded note under her tray. The letters, cut from a prison journal and pasted onto paper, folded into a gruesome message: "Sluts deserve death." Megan quickly crumpled up the note, looking around. No one was looking in her direction too closely, but that didn't mean anything. In prison, the walls had eyes. "You look pale," Lisa remarked when they returned to the cell after breakfast. "Trouble with the baby?" Megan shook her head, then pulled out a crumpled note. Lisa read it without an expression on her face, then methodically tore it into tiny pieces and flushed it down the toilet. "The first warning is always the worst," she said mundanely, as if she were talking about the weather. "You don't pay much attention to the second one. Do you think there will be a second?" Megan asked, feeling a chill run down her spine. Lisa shrugged. "Maybe, maybe not. Depends on how serious the intentions are. Most of the time, it's just intimidation." Over the next week, Megan received 2 more such notes, one in her locker at the laundromat where she worked 3 days a week, the other under her pillow, which was especially disturbing because it meant someone had entered their cell while they were at work. Or in the mess hall, James looked exhausted too. During one of the inspections, Megan had noticed shadows under his eyes and a new nervous habit. He was constantly rubbing his wedding ring as if it had suddenly become uncomfortable. During a rare meeting in the laundry room back room, he told her that his wife had started asking questions. Carol Foster, a school teacher, was a perceptive woman, sensitive to any changes in her husband's behavior. "She found the loan receipts," James said tiredly, massaging his temples. "I told her it was for roof repairs, but she didn't believe me. We were planning a vacation this summer, and all of a sudden I'm taking out a loan." Megan shrugged, trying not to show irritation. "That's your problem. Will there be money?" James nodded, not looking her in the eye. "I borrowed part of it from my brother. The rest is from the loan, but it's the best I can do. And I won't lie for your parole. I'm already in enough shit as it is." Megan moved closer to him, put her hand on his chest, and felt his heart beating fast. "You'll do whatever it takes, James. Otherwise, I'm going to write your wife a detailed letter about our meetings, with details that only she will be able to confirm." For a second, fury flashed in his eyes with such intensity that Megan involuntarily backed away. Never before had she seen this side of James, a reserved, almost soft man. But then the anger faded, replaced by blunt submission. "I'll get you the money tomorrow," he said in a lifeless voice. "Just leave my family alone." When he left, Megan sank down on the detergent drawer and burst into tears for the first time in a long time. She didn't recognize herself. She used to be able to manipulate people, but never stooped to outright blackmail. Prison had changed her, made her tougher, more ruthless. Or maybe she'd always been like that. Just now the masks were off. That same night, Megan told Lisa about her plan with the money and the parole. "Do you have any idea what he's capable of?" Lisa asked, sitting on her bunk and braiding her red hair into a tight braid. "James?" Megan snorted. "He's weak, afraid of his own shadow." Lisa looked at her carefully, and in her gaze, Megan read what she didn't want to see: pity. There's nothing more dangerous than a cornered animal, Lisa said quietly, especially if it has something to lose. The next morning, Megan sent a request for a meeting with the prison lawyer David Cohen, a tired, middle-aged man, was the only link between the inmates and the outside world of justice. He helped draft appeals, motions, and other legal documents. Megan planned to ask him to contact her attorney about applying for parole because of her pregnancy. She thought carefully about every word. She wasn't going to directly accuse James of coercion in her application. That would be too risky and could backfire on her. But Hint's careful language about the difficult circumstances of her situation might make the authorities suspect something amiss and launch an investigation. The mere threat of such an investigation should have forced James to cooperate fully. At 16 o'clock, after finishing her shift at the laundromat, Megan stayed late to finish a draft of a letter to her attorney. She sat in the small laundry sorting room, scribbling out in neat handwriting the lines she hoped would be her ticket to freedom. The situation is complicated by the fact that the child's father is a correctional officer. I fear pressure and possible reprisals if this information becomes known to the administration. James Foster, the East Block guard, is unwilling to admit responsibility, but I can provide details of our meetings, including dates and locations. Megan was so immersed in writing the letter that she didn't hear the quiet footsteps behind her. It was only when a shadow ran across the room that she turned around sharply, startled out of her thoughts. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to startle you. It was Ellen, one of the new inmates working in the laundry room, a quiet woman convicted of credit card fraud." I think Megan exhaled a sigh of relief and quickly folded the letter. "It's okay, I'm on my way out." Ellen nodded but remained standing in the doorway, eyeing Megan strangely. "They say you're having a baby," she said suddenly. "You shouldn't overwork yourself." There was something in her voice that sent a chill down Megan's spine, but she smiled and walked past Ellen, clutching the folded letter tighter to her. The hallway was empty. Most of the inmates were at dinner or in the recreation room watching some romantic comedy. Megan decided to go through the service corridor to avoid the mess hall. She had no appetite, and the thought of sitting under dozens of prying eyes was unbearable. The service corridor was dimly lit and used mostly by the staff to move quickly between different parts of the prison. Prisoners were only allowed to walk here when accompanied by guards, or with special passes. Megan had one, thanks to her exemplary behavior and her work in the laundry room. She was walking, absorbed in her thoughts, when she heard footsteps behind her. Quick, purposeful ones. Megan turned around, expecting to see a guard, but the hallway was empty. Strange. She could have sworn. The lights suddenly flickered and went out. For a few seconds, Megan found herself in complete darkness until the dim emergency lights came on. Her heart thudded somewhere in her throat. Self-preservation instinct screamed danger. She quickened her step, clutching the letter tighter in her hand. The turn was near, and beyond it was the lighted main corridor with surveillance cameras. A rustle behind her made her turn around sharply. This time a shadow flashed at the far end of the corridor. A human figure that quickly disappeared around the corner. "Hey!" Megan shouted, but her voice sounded unnaturally high and frightened. Fear spurred her on and she almost ran, but the heel of her prison shoe twisted treacherously. Megan instinctively threw her arms forward to cushion her fall, dropping the letter. The white rectangle of paper slid across the concrete floor a few feet forward. She rose to her knees, feeling her bruised palms sore. At that moment, the light flashed again, and she saw it. The silhouette of a man standing over her. Megan didn't have time to scream. The first blow came in the solar plexus, knocking all the air out of her lungs. Then came a series of quick, precise blows. To the head, to the side. She fell on her back, instinctively covering her stomach with her hands, trying to protect her unborn child. "Please," she wheezed, feeling the metallic taste of blood in her mouth. The baby. But it was as if her attacker didn't hear. All Megan could see was a dark figure, its face hidden in the shadows. The last, most terrible blow came with something heavy in the head. The world exploded with a white flash, and then darkness came. The dead silence of the corridor was broken only by the heavy breathing of the assailant and the sound of dripping blood. The figure bent down, picked up the letter from the floor, and placed it carefully, almost gently, next to Megan Riley's lifeless body. Then it glanced once more at the turned-off surveillance camera hanging from the ceiling, and with quick steps disappeared into the darkness. The hallway light flickered and came back on full force, mercilessly illuminating the body of the woman, whose life and the life of her unborn child had been cut short in the deserted prison corridor. Blood spread across the concrete floor, and the letter Megan never sent slowly soaked scarlet, blurring the ink with James Foster's name on it. Detective Samantha Clark parked her tattered Ford at the main entrance of the Huntsville Women's Prison. The 41-year-old woman with short brown hair and deep wrinkles in the corners of her eyes took her time getting out of the car. She took one last sip of her long cold coffee and looked up at the gray jail building, frowning. 22 years on the police force had taught her one thing. No one liked cops in institutions like this. Not even other members of the law. Samantha's background was in the military, 4 years with the military police in Afghanistan, then a stint with the Houston Police Department, and the last 7 years in homicide. She was valued for her pedantry, attention to detail, and impenetrable calm. Colleagues respected her professionalism, though some considered her overly principled. Her ex-husband, whom she divorced 5 years ago, called her a bloody justice machine. Perhaps he was right. Samantha sighed and got out of the car. The Texas morning sun had already warmed the air to an unpleasant stuffiness. Her mind was spinning with the facts of the case she had received the day before. Inmate Megan Riley, 32 years old, found dead in the service corridor. Preliminary pathologist's report. Death due to multiple blunt force trauma to the head and body. Time of death was between 16 and 17 hours. The cameras in the corridor were not working due to a technical malfunction. The prison yard was empty. All the inmates were at the mandatory morning census. After the incident, Samantha was greeted in the reception area by Director Robert Harris, a tall man with a military bearing and graying temples. His handshake was firm and his smile was strained. "Detective Clark, thank you for your promptness," he said as he ushered her into his office. "It's an unpleasant situation, but I'm sure we'll get to the bottom of it quickly." The director's office was a model of faceless government functionality. A standard desk, a computer, a few folders, an American flag in the corner, and pictures of high-ranking officials on the wall. The only personal item was a small framed photograph of the director with his wife and, presumably, grandchildren. "Tell me what happened," Samantha said, declining the offered coffee and pulling out a notepad. Harris folded his hands in front of him as if preparing to deliver a rehearsed speech. "Unfortunately, despite our best efforts, the prison remains a dangerous place. Detective Megan Riley was discovered by one of the guards during a routine round. Apparently, it was a typical prison fight. Riley had several recent altercations with other inmates. On what basis do you draw that conclusion?" Samantha asked, watching the director's reaction carefully. Harris wrinkled his nose slightly, clearly unhappy that his version of the story was being questioned at once. "We have information about several altercations between Riley and other inmates. You see, Detective, in recent weeks there have been certain rumors surrounding her. In recent weeks that could have been aggressive." "What kind of rumors?" Harris paused, as if searching for words. "Rumors about her, special position, and her alleged relationship with one of the employees. All of this is, of course, speculation and gossip typical of closed institutions." Samantha made a note in her notebook. "I'll need access to the crime scene, the victim's personal effects, her medical records, and the opportunity to talk to staff and inmates." "Of course." Harris nodded, though a shadow of displeasure flickered across his face. "But I would ask you to investigate as quickly as possible. Incidents like this are disruptive to discipline and regimentation and create nervousness among the prisoners and jeopardize your career," Samantha mentally added, but remained silent. Instead, she asked, "Who discovered the body?" "Officer Garcia, during routine rounds at 17:30. "What about the security cameras?" Harris said, "Unfortunately, there was a technical malfunction that day. We were just updating the security software and several cameras were temporarily down." Samantha made another note. The coincidence seemed all too convenient. After speaking with the director, a security guard escorted Samantha into the small room that served as a temporary morgue. Megan Riley's body lay on a metal table. Covered with a sheet, Samantha put on gloves and examined the corpse, noting the multiple bruises and wounds. The injuries were particularly severe on the head and upper torso. but there was something odd about the arrangement of the blows. They had been delivered expertly, with a precise understanding of how to inflict maximum damage. It wasn't like a chaotic prison brawl. Near the body was a plastic folder containing Megan's personal belongings taken from the crime scene. Among them was a half-written letter to her lawyer. Stained with blood, Samantha read the text carefully, noting the mention of a guard named James Foster, and hints of pregnancy. Next up was Megan's cell, which she shared with an inmate named Lisa Taylor. A cramped space with 2 narrow bunks, a small table, and a steel toilet in the corner. Megan's personal belongings were already packed in a cardboard box. Samantha went through the contents carefully. A few books, cheap cosmetics allowed by prison regulations, photographs of some people, presumably relatives, a few letters. In the lining of one of the books, a tattered copy of Pride and Prejudice, Samantha found a hidden makeshift diary of folded and stapled sheets of paper. Small, neat handwriting covered every page. Thursday, April 18th. James was on duty in the library again. We were talking about Hemingway. His hands were shaking as he handed me the book. I know he's thinking about me. I can see it in his eyes. Monday, May 6th. It happened. We met in the back room. James was tender and scared at the same time, said he'd never had feelings like this before. Standard phrase for men of his type, but still nice to hear. Saturday, June 15th. My period is 2 weeks late. I'm afraid to even think about the consequences, but everything points to pregnancy. What do I do? Tell James? Keep quiet? Take advantage of the situation? Tuesday, July 2nd. Told James he's in a panic, as I expected, but now I have leverage. This might be my chance for an early one. The notes continued, becoming more and more disturbing. Wednesday, July 10th. Received first threatening note. Someone knows someone is watching. I'm afraid it might have something to do with James. What if his wife found out? Friday, July 12th. Another note. This time in my bed. Whores deserve to die. Scared to death, but I can't show fear in this place. Weakness is a death sentence. Monday, July 15th. James looks shattered. Says his wife suspects something. I don't care. I need money and support for parole. I'm using it. It's survival. The last entry was dated the day Megan died. Thursday, July 18th. Writing a letter to my lawyer. This is my insurance. If something happens to me, the truth will come out. I'm afraid the threats are real. I saw Ellen today and she looked at me funny. There's something wrong with that woman. It's like she's watching me. Samantha closed the journal thoughtfully. The situation loomed more complicated than a typical prison fight. The next step was going to be the interrogations. Lisa Taylor, Megan's cellmate, was a thin, red-haired woman with a penetrating gaze and a silent personality. She sat across from Samantha in the interrogation room, looking calmly at the detective. I'm sorry for your loss, Samantha began. Did you share a cell with Megan for a long time? 2 years, Lisa replied succinctly. Were you close? Lisa shrugged slightly. As close as you can be in prison, we respected each other's space. We stayed out of each other's space. But yeah, I knew her better than most people here. What can you tell me about her relationship with guard James Foster? Lisa raised an eyebrow but didn't seem surprised by the question. So, you already know? Megan kept a diary? Lisa nodded. They dated for a few months. At first, it was just a fling to brighten up the time. Then Megan got pregnant. She paused. That changed everything. In what way? Megan saw it as a chance for parole. And James, it was a disaster for him. Wife, kids, job. He could have lost everything. Do you think he could have... Samantha left the question unfinished. Lisa shook her head. James? I don't think so. He's too soft, although... She thought for a moment. He was acting strange the day of the murder. More nervous than usual. I saw him in the morning when he was doing the background check. His hands were shaking so bad he could barely hold the clipboard. And then... Lisa stopped talking. Then what? He wasn't at his post in the afternoon. Unusual for him. James was always punctual. Do you know anything about his wife? Lisa smiled slightly. Only what Megan learned from him, Carol Foster, an elementary school teacher. They've been married 15 years. According to James, their marriage has long since become routine, standard excuses for a man cheating on his wife. She paused. But Megan had mentioned that lately, Carol had begun to suspect her husband of cheating. Finding some evidence it might be worth talking to her. Is there anyone else I should be looking at? Lisa thought for a moment. Ellen Porter, new inmate, works in the laundry room. Megan mentioned her the day she died. Saeed. Ellen looked at her strangely, like she knew something. And also, Lisa lowered her voice. I heard Ellen talk on the prison phone a couple times. She usually kept to herself, but these calls were emotional. She was arguing with someone in a whisper. After talking to Lisa, Samantha went to the video surveillance center. The officer in charge of the cameras showed her the footage from the day of the murder. Just like the director had said, the cameras in the service hallway weren't working. But on other tapes, Samantha found an interesting detail. James Foster had indeed been absent from his post from 16 to 17:30 hours, exactly at the time of the murder. Another recording caught Samantha's attention. A camera at the entrance to the laundry room recorded Megan talking to another inmate, presumably Ellen Porter, shortly before her death. The woman looked tense, her posture unnatural. Next on the list was the interrogation of James Foster. The guard looked haggard. Red eyes, unshaven face, nervous movements. He sat slouched, avoiding a direct gaze. Officer Foster, can you tell me where you were yesterday between 16 and 17:30 hours? James swallowed. Yeah, I went to the administration block. I had an appointment with the personnel officer. Who can confirm that? Yeah, don't know. The meeting was canceled when I got there. I just waited for a while, then I came back. That's quite a long time you waited, Samantha remarked. An hour and a half? James rubbed his neck nervously. I went into the break room, had some coffee, talked to some co-workers. What co-workers? Yeah, I don't remember exactly. There were a lot of people there. Samantha changed tactics. What can you tell us about your relationship with Megan Riley? James's face went pale. We had a professional relationship, guard and prisoner, nothing more. Really? Now I have a letter that Megan wrote to her lawyer. It details your meetings, and then there's a diary where she talks about your affair and her pregnancy. James covered his face with his hands. God, yeah, Do you realize that having an affair with a prisoner is a serious offense, Officer Foster? Not to mention you might have had a motive for murder, considering she threatened to reveal your secret. I didn't kill her? James exclaimed. Yes, we had a relationship. I made a mistake. A huge mistake. And yes, Megan was pregnant. She started blackmailing me, demanding money. But I would never hurt her. Then where were you at the time of the murder? And just be honest this time. James was silent for a long time, then said quietly, I was out with my wife. She came to the prison unannounced, said she wanted to talk to me right away. We talked in the staff parking lot. What was the conversation about? She knew about the affair. I don't know how, but she found out. Carol said she wanted to talk to Megan. I refused to let her in. We had a fight, and I left. I didn't get back to my post until after the incident was reported. Samantha made a note of it. The story sounded plausible, but it needed verification. I need to speak to your wife, Officer Foster. Carol Foster arrived at the jail the day after Samantha's call. She was an attractive woman in her early 40s, with a neat haircut and a discerning eye. She held herself with dignity, although it was clear that the last few days had not been easy for her. Mrs. Foster, thank you for agreeing to come, Samantha began. Call me Carol, the woman replied, smoothing the folds in her blouse. I prefer to get this over with as soon as possible. Were you aware of your husband's affair with the prisoner Megan Riley? Carol didn't seem surprised by the directness of the question. I found out about a month ago. James started acting strange, staying late at work, irritable, constantly checking his phone classic signs. Her voice was dry, almost businesslike. Then I found a credit card receipt in his things for a large sum of money. When I asked, he lied about fixing the roof. Did you check his cell phone, his personal belongings? Carol nodded without a trace of embarrassment. Of course, and she found a note with M.R. quote, S initials and strange phrases like, to be decided before the birth. It wasn't hard to guess. So what did you do? First, I wanted to file for divorce immediately. 15 years of marriage, 2 children, and he ruined it all because of an affair with a prisoner. Her voice trembled for the first time in the conversation. But then she decided to talk to him first. Give him a chance to explain himself. Is that why you came to the prison the day of the murder? Yes, I called him that morning. But he hung up on me. so I decided to come in person. We met in the parking lot. James was scared, nervous. Said it was over between him and that woman, that it was a mistake. Carol grinned bitterly. I didn't believe it. Too many lies in the last few months. I said I wanted to talk to her in person. And how did James react? He got even more scared, said it was impossible, that they wouldn't let me see the prisoner. We had a fight, I said a lot of things. Eventually he left, and I stayed in the parking lot for a while to calm down. Samantha watched the woman carefully. Her story matched James's version, but something about her behavior alerted the detective. Do you know an inmate named Ellen Porter? Carol blinked. For the first time in the entire conversation, she looked genuinely surprised. No, I don't think so. Should you? Samantha studied her face for a few more seconds, then changed the subject. What did you do after the fight with your husband? I went home, picked up the kids from school, just a normal day. She paused. You don't think I had anything to do with that woman's death, do you? I'm just gathering information at the moment, Mrs. Foster. The interrogation of Ellen Porter proved to be the most difficult. A silent woman of about 35, with an expressionless face and dull hair. She answered questions one syllable, maintaining a detached expression. Did you work at the laundromat with Megan Riley? Yes, what was your relationship? Nothing, we barely spoke to each other. The cameras caught you talking to her the day she died. Ellen shrugged. Just a normal work conversation. Nothing special. What exactly did you talk about? I don't remember exactly. Something about laundry or scheduling. Samantha showed her Megan's diary entry that mentioned Ellen's strange behavior. Megan says that you were following her. Is that true? No, that's crazy. Did you know she was pregnant? Ellen frowned slightly. The whole prison knew word travels fast. Who did you talk to on the prison phone on July 18th, an hour before Megan died? I don't remember. Records show the call was made to a cell phone. I know a lot of people. I don't remember every call. The conversation continued in the same vein. Ellen denied any involvement in Megan's death and any connection to anyone outside the prison other than old friends. After the interrogation, Samantha returned to the police station and requested an itemization of phone calls from the prison over the past month. Her intuition told her that something wasn't adding up here. She also requested full bios on Ellen Porter and Carol Foster. The results came back 2 days later, and they were quite interesting. The phone number Ellen had called on the day of the murder belonged to Carol Foster. What's more, there were 7 recorded calls between the two of them in the last month. An in-depth background check revealed another interesting detail. Ellen Porter and Carol Foster attended the same high school in a small town in East Texas. They were classmates. The picture was starting to take shape. Samantha requested a warrant to access the Foster family's mail and received another confirmation of her theory. Letters from Ellen, sent before her arrest, were found in Carol's personal mail. The old friends kept in touch. Samantha decided to round up all the key figures for a confrontation. Principal Harris, initially opposed to this unusual approach, agreed after mentioning the possible media publicity the story might receive. The 3 gathered in the small interrogation room where James Foster, Carol Foster, and Ellen Porter. Samantha left them alone for a few minutes. Watching through the one-way glass, they sat in silence, avoiding looking at each other. Entering the room, Samantha placed the file folder on the table and said quietly, I know what happened. I know who killed Megan Riley and why it was a bluff. But the reaction was telling. James turned pale and lowered his gaze. Carol tensed, her hand involuntarily jerking toward her purse. Ellen kept a stony expression on her face, but her fingers began tapping nervously on the table. Here's how I see the situation, Samantha continued, opening the folder. James Foster began an affair with Megan Riley, an inmate. When she became pregnant, he panicked. Megan began blackmailing him, demanding money and support for early release. She looked at James. Right? James nodded silently, still looking at the floor. Meanwhile, Carol Foster began to suspect her husband of cheating. She checked his phone, found clues, and realized what was going on. Samantha shifted her gaze to Carol. But instead of confronting your husband right away, you decided to take a different course of action. You contacted your old high school friend, Ellen Porter, who was just serving time in the same prison. Carol turned visibly pale. Her hands clenched into fists. This is absurd, she said, but her voice trembled. Yes, I've known Ellen since high school, but we haven't spoken in years. 7 phone conversations in the last month say otherwise. Samantha objected calmly, laying the phone records on the table. The last one was the day Megan was killed, 20 minutes before she died. James looked up, the horror of realization in his eyes. Carol, what did you do? Ellen remained silent, her face a fixed mask. I didn't do anything, Carol snapped, but her voice was no longer confident. Yes, I called Ellen. We're old friends. It's not a crime. The day of the murder, you came to the prison to talk to your husband. Samantha continued. You made a scene in the parking lot to create an alibi for yourself, and then you called Ellen to signal action. No, Carol exclaimed. I really wanted to talk to that woman. I wanted to look her in the eye. And that's why you had Ellen kill her? Samantha asked quietly. Ellen stood up suddenly, resting her hands on the table. I want a lawyer now, so do I, Carol quickly added. James looked at his wife with an expression of deep shock and disgust. God, Carol, you. Samantha nodded. Of course, that's your right. But before we finish, I want to clear up a few details. She pulled another document out of the folder. Samantha, we checked the CCTV footage from the parking lot. You were there 45 minutes after your husband left, talking on the phone. The call was made to the prison number Ellen usually called from. There was a heavy silence in the room, Samantha continued. Here's how it happened. You, Carol, found out about your husband's infidelity and decided to get revenge. You contacted Ellen, who had been convicted of fraud but had a darker past, a series of assaults for which she was never convicted. You came up with a plan. Suddenly, Ellen laughed, a bitter, harsh laugh. What a fantasy, detective. It's like a novel. Then explain those phone records, Samantha countered. And explain why your DNA was found on a piece of mail found next to Megan's body. It was another bluff. The DNA test results hadn't come back yet, but Ellen's reaction was telling the woman flinched and cast a quick glance at Carol. It was her idea, Ellen said, suddenly pointing at Carol. She's been calling me for weeks, telling me that James ruined everything, that slut ruined their family, that she's pregnant and is going to use the baby to get out early. Shut up, Carol shouted, jumping up from her chair. Just shut up. That day, Ellen continued, ignoring her friend. After their argument in the parking lot, she called me in a panic, said that James refused to let her in with Megan, that he was protecting that slut even now. Ellen spoke in an even voice, without emotion. She said, do it now. Remember what we decided. James sat with his hands covering his face, his shoulders shaking. I had to do it fast, while the shift changed, and the hallways were almost empty, Ellen continued. The cameras were off. I followed Megan as she came out of the laundry room. She was walking through the service hallway. It was easy, you monster, Carol shouted, lunging at Ellen, but Samantha intercepted her, pulling her back. I never asked you to kill her! Never! Ellen looked at her with cold contempt. I want her out of our lives forever, were your words. Carol, at any cost, do anything, are also your words. Don't pretend to be an innocent sheep right now. Samantha radioed the officers waiting outside the door. They entered and led both women away, reading them their rights. James remained sitting motionless, as if in a trance. I'm to blame for all of this, he said quietly when he was alone with Samantha. If I hadn't just... You made a mistake, Officer Foster, Samantha said, gathering the paperwork into a folder. A serious mistake that will have consequences. But murder is a whole other level, and the people who committed it will be held accountable for it. She left him in the interrogation room and walked out into the hallway where Principal Harris was waiting for her. Well, Detective, he said dryly, you were right. This turned out to be a lot more serious than a regular prison fight. It's always more serious than meets the eye, Director. Samantha rubbed her eyes tiredly, especially when it comes to love, jealousy, and betrayal. That evening, Samantha sat in her car in the prison parking lot finishing up her report. Megan Riley's story had come to an end, but left behind only bitterness and ruined lives. A pregnant inmate who used her position for blackmail, a weak-willed guard who succumbed to temptation, a jealous wife seeking revenge, an ex-girlfriend willing to kill for the sake of an old friendship. In this story, There were no heroes or villains, only ordinary people who made terrible mistakes, and the thin threads of their destinies woven together to lead to tragedy.